Interesting. That's a fascinating read on that. And I know you've done a lot of research on it behind the scenes, Jim. So that's a fascinating take. Again, I've been going back to a lot of Marshall McLuhan of the medium as the message. And in a weird way, crypto is a new medium somehow. And a lot of these things around it, even an NFT is almost like a new medium. And so what is the message? And yeah, it gets very hallucinogenic is another great way. It really breaks down our concept of what is money. You would argue that a lot of people don't really have a great relationship with money to begin with, so maybe it can be morphed and changed quickly with these digital forms. Right. And then you start looking at things in terms of inflation versus a Bitcoin world versus a non-Bitcoin world. A guy named Jeff Booth wrote a whole book about that. So yeah, it gets very interesting. So I'd be curious of how you see how this plays out in the next 5-10 years as we go forward. But this is great stuff, Jim. Obviously, Countdown to Crisis, separate video you made where you talk a little bit more about this crash, how people can position themselves. There's a URL below, londonreal.tv/Jim. I think I asked you this last time you were in the studio here in London 6 years ago, and I'll ask you again. Jim, you talk about a lot of things in the world that look bad, and yet you always seem to be someone who's quite optimistic. And so how do you position this when you tell people this, that guess what, this doesn't mean you should go jump off a building. There's actually a lot of ways to solve this or position yourself. How do you stay optimistic?
Well, I'm kind of naturally optimistic, so that's a good place to start. You get, people always put words in your mouth. You get this like doom and gloom reputation. I'm not a doom and gloomer, but I am an analyst. And as an analyst, you're not doing your job if you don't tell people what's happening, like what's actually happening, get the right data, get the right models, which is as important, and just be candid about what's going on. So I try to do that. If the news isn't good, it's not because I'm not an optimist. It's just because I'm not going to, fake you out. But to your point, Brian, one of my favorite stories about how you can make money in any state of the world, certainly preserve wealth. You can do that, but how can you make money? There was a guy, I've written about this before, but his name was Hugo Stinnes. Who's Hugo Stinnes? Well, he was an industrialist in the early 1920s in Weimar, Germany. And he saw the hyperinflation coming, but long before it hit. So he went out and borrowed massive amounts of Reichsmarks, which was the currency at the time. And he bought industrial assets. He bought shipping lines, he bought railroads, he bought coal, mines, et cetera. So then the inflation comes along, the hyperinflation. It wasn't even like $1 trillion to 1. It was like they were sweeping it down the sewers at the end. And he paid the debts back. I would say pennies on the dollar, but it wasn't even that. It was like he paid all his debts back and kept the assets. And he was the richest man in Germany because he borrowed money. And if you're the debtor and the money becomes worthless, you don't owe any money. Here's a penny here, I'll pay you back. But he kept the assets, which retained their value, and became the richest man in Germany. And his nickname, I don't speak German, but I'll try, was Inflationskönig, which means the inflation king. So there's a guy who, in the worst hyperinflation of any industrial economy in history, became the richest man in Germany by anticipating it and doing the right trade. My other favorite story, Joseph P. Kennedy, father of President John F. Kennedy, saw the crash coming in 1929, and he just shorted his way all the way through it. He just shorted it, made a fortune, became one of the richest men in the United States in the early, after the 1929 crash, early 1930s. And that family fortune and dynasty are still going strong. So here you have, if you said, gee, what are the two worst economic disasters of the 20th century? Most people would say, well, the Weimar hyperinflation and the 1929 crash. Yeah, but here's two guys who became the richest guys in their countries because they saw it coming and did the right trade. So what I say to investors and savers is, you got to see this stuff coming and do the right trade.